First things first, let's talk about the election. You've been talking about Kamala
Yeah.
Harris, obviously very big anti-Bitcoin. The deficit's kind of going to widen either way with either candidate, but with Kamala, like her whole platform is about spending money on different constituents and things like that. So, I mean, Trump's kind of up on Polymarket right now. Just looking at the live odds, it's 52% to 47.3. So the odds are
Oh,
certainly
really?
widening out.
Okay, it's even widened out. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, definitely widening out. I think off of the back of this weekend, Trump going back to Butler, that was kind of not a seminal moment of sorts because it kind
Yeah.
of brought everybody back to what happened in July and reminded everybody what's at stake. But
Right.
where's your head at with the election? Who do you think is going to win this thing, and what do you think the implications
I
are?
mean, I do think it's a 50-50 coin toss. I think the who's going to win. I think you have to look at. There's a lot of women in this. You know, there's 50. We're 50% women. Every woman I talk to is vehemently anti-Trump. And so, rather than talk to men, I think you should talk to women to sort of see where the danger level is of a non-Trump presidency. And I think, even though it's not an agenda on my top of my list, which is abortion, that does seem to be the main issue for a lot of these women. And, there really is a concern that there'll be a federal ban on abortion. And again, I'm not saying there will be or anything, but this is what a lot of women seem to be very focused on. So I think there's a lot of women, and I think there's a lot of young people who are going to go vote, right? And I think if you get enough Taylor Swift fans and enough women together, they're going to defeat Donald Trump. So, I think most white men will vote for Trump. And I think most Hispanics will probably vote for Trump as well. And, I think the black vote's going to be probably more Kamala. So, you have these big blocks. I don't know which of these, it's just numbers, right? And it really all boils down to like Pennsylvania. So, if you look at the state electoral map, if Trump wins Pennsylvania, I think it's kind of over. I don't see a way that Kamala can recover from that. On the other hand, if Trump wins Michigan, it's also probably over, right? So I think Trump's got sort of two things that can work in his favor: Michigan and Pennsylvania. I think the odds for Kamala are going to be much. She's got to win all three of those states: Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. If she does, it's going to be tough for Trump. So I think it's very close. Is my that's how I would realistically phrase it.
Absolutely.
And, as far as for Bitcoin, I wouldn't say Kamala is anti-Bitcoin. It's not that, right? I think Kamala is going to be more of the same. I don't expect her to come out and say, we got this new anti-Bitcoin law.
Because
I
if we
really
think of
don't.
Kamala as just an extension of Joe Biden and basically just the going regime, she's just another empty suit, if you will. And so it's really,
I
like
think
you said,
that's
it's more of the
probably
same.
pretty accurate. Look, I don't think she's got opinions of her own. I think she takes her orders from Alex Soros and the deep state. And look, I think it's probably going to be more of the same. I would say there's some chance that we get further choke point 2.0, choke point 3.0, and a further crackdown on crypto. I don't know. As far as being purely in Bitcoin, I don't think it matters all that much. It definitely, you'd prefer something like a Bitcoin reserve. You'd prefer something like, let's get rid of Gary Gensler. Let's not put him in charge of Treasury. You'd prefer all those things, right? But is it going to be absolutely terrible for Bitcoin price? I don't think so. So I do think Trump will be better for Bitcoin price, but I don't think Kamala is going to be bad for Bitcoin price. So as far as purely for Bitcoin, I think both of them will work. I think the problem you have as a Bitcoiner is your taxes are probably going to go up under Kamala. The country may be in worse shape because she's enacting policies that make no sense. But Bitcoin price might go up quite a bit either way. I'm not totally worried. I'm actually not. I'm not like sitting there going, "Oh my God, Kamala's getting in." We're hosed. If she gets in, I'm not going to panic. I'll be fine. I'll be like, okay, more of the same kind of inept leadership that we've had over the last 3 years.
Yeah, I think that's the easiest way to put it. Looking at the states that are in play right now, Trump is up pretty big in Pennsylvania now. I think, again, following what happened in Butler, it's 56-44. And so I think, and Kamala's
on the betting
leading
markets,
betting markets.
Yeah.
So would you put more weight? I mean, this is just kind of obviously betting markets have been around for ages, but now with Polymarket integrating, being the most deep and liquid one, I think you can assign more weight to a deep and liquid financial market than you can that's one that's relatively illiquid.
To the extent that look, I think the markets are predicting what betting people believe. But do betting people know how deep this SWIFT phenomena is? They don't really know. We don't know. We will know when the vote comes, right? So I do think that there are kind of, to use Dick Cheney's word, unknown unknowns. We don't know. We have no idea how many women are just completely outraged at Donald Trump and are just going to vote. Do a protest vote in Pennsylvania. We don't know. So, I think it's going to be, look, you 52% or whatever, or 54. These are still within the margin of error, right? Mm-hmm. So, good, great. Console yourself that you have a 2-point advantage today, and you were down 4 points, 2 weeks ago. I don't. To me, this is not like, you can't really hang your hat on this stuff.
It's very immaterial.
I wouldn't get too excited about your 2-point advantage, right?
Exactly. Yeah, 50-50 split, but either way, Bitcoin is inevitable, if you will.
Bitcoin's inevitable, and I do think that there's all these other things other than Bitcoin, which directly, which you as Bitcoiners probably want. Freedom of speech, you probably want. I wouldn't want to be on this podcast and know that I might be arrested for saying something that's against the current regime. I definitely, it may impact my life in many ways. I may, if we do get sort of some laws against fact checking and stuff like this, I may be on Twitter a lot less, right? Who knows, right? It's just, they may ban Twitter entirely. Who knows, right? So I think there's a lot of things that could happen that could negatively impact us, other than the Bitcoin price.
100%. Yeah, one of the things, you put out a tweet yesterday, actually. It was 11 things we know, and number one was the entire economy is propped up by government jobs. The non-farm payrolls report for September, the non-seasonally adjusted version of it, all net payroll growth came from, it was like plus 800,000 government jobs, and then the private sector shed 400,000 or something like that before the adjustment. And so net, it was all government jobs. Yeah, so what's your take on the economy right now? I mean, it seems like the rates market is saying that growth is rebounding. Gold is saying that there's a little bit of inflation risk there.
You have to, you put your head on the nail on the head there, right? You hit the nail on the head. Is these numbers, these statistics that people use, are not the complete story, right? The fact that we had a jobs report that's positive doesn't mean that all is well in the world of the American economy. I would say we're creating a lot of government jobs, and if you just walk into a DMV, you get a sense of like how great government jobs are. They're not so great, right? We can't do the government has been notorious. American government, not all world governments, but American government has been just notoriously bad at doing things, right? We couldn't put up a website for Obamacare when, back in the day. Like, Social Security are run by, try getting customer service on, any government agency. It's impossible. Try renewing your passport. It's like, it's a disaster, right? So the government is a very, very inefficient organism that is great at kind of perpetuating itself and not great at like producing value in an economy. Mm-hmm. So when I'm hearing that the amount of people working in the government's going to 50%, that does not make me think, wow, we've solved our economic problem. Now, according to some stat, you may be doing great. Some payroll stat or something else, right? Or GDP growth or something, right?
Yeah, and if we look at GDP, it's consumption plus investment plus what? Plus government spending. And so if the government is increasingly issuing debt and then more jobs are coming from the government, is your economy really growing or is your government just getting bigger?
Look, to me, I think just like I do think your best metric of, how's the economy doing? Well, and the other thing is you could say, people are going out to restaurants a lot, right? They're packed. Everybody says that, right? That's like a metric. Well, they're packed, but also consumer debt's skyrocketing. We're maxing out our credit cards right now, right?
And the personal savings rate is at an all-time low too, yeah.
Personal savings rate's at an all-time low. So I would say my picture of the economy, it's not entirely data-driven. It's also just like as I travel in the U.S., what I see cities in decline, right? I see just homelessness increasing overall. I see cities in decline. I see crime going up. I see government jobs going up. I see empty office buildings. I don't see thriving companies. I see companies laying off workers. I see AI as a threat to hiring. So I see a picture of, it's a little bit more bleak. I definitely see, and I see this in a period where everything's supposed to be great. So I'm very skeptical that the economy is doing so great right now. And everybody I know, and you ask them, if you're into stocks or Bitcoin, you're fine, right? The stocks are at an all-time high. Bitcoin's close to an all-time high. You're okay. But if you're a normal working class person, you're not so great, right? So and sort of even if you're relatively wealthy, I feel like you're doing the calculation in nominal dollars. You'll be like, well, I'm up. But then you ask yourself what you can buy with those nominal dollars. It's gone down quite a bit since 2020, right? I think the biggest sort of sticker shock is restaurants. You go to a restaurant right now, dinner for two. Dinner for two at a restaurant used to be under $100. Mm-hmm. Dinner for two at a restaurant right now, it's very obvious, very generally is $150, and you're not having prime rib.
Yeah. Sunday breakfast yesterday, little hole in the wall. We both got pancakes. It was me and one other person. $65, including the tip.
Right, and that would have been you sort of think 2 people pancakes, $30, right? That's what I would say in my head, right? So clearly, those kind of sticker shock things are there. Those prices aren't going down, right? They aren't going down. I definitely feel, and I think that's where Trump is the biggest argument, right? Mm-hmm. Is I think that anybody who's paying those bills, who's footing the bill, is like, whoa, we got some serious problems here, right? But I think, the women in America, maybe they don't necessarily realize they're not the one pulling out the Visa card, so they don't quite realize. They're like, hurry up and just buy the pancakes, and let's talk about Trump trying to put an abortion ban because. That's what they're focused on. The young people who don't yet have jobs are like, well, sure. I mean, I definitely want my student debt eradicated. And, all these kind of socialistic things sound great to me. So, I think that it really depends on where if you're the guy paying the bills and sweating it, you have one different approach to this thing, and whether you're sort of I'm not saying unemployed, but living off the system or just working as a housewife, you're probably not as you don't see the stuff the same way everybody else does. So I'm sort of hoping for a Trump victory. Don't love Trump personally as a person, but yeah, I mean, I am hoping that Trump wins.
Yeah.
And I think as a Bitcoiner, I just gotta really hope that Trump wins.
Absolutely. There was Elon is obviously now totally on the Trump train, wearing his MAGA hat and his profile picture. One of the things that he said, and I liked, your thoughts on this, because you mentioned Kamala will cement her legacy with mass immigration. That's one of the things you said in this tweet. Elon has also said that he's worried if Kamala wins, then she will continue importing new voters for the Democratic Party into swing states exclusively. If you look at Arizona, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Michigan, all these big swing states, record percentage year-over-year increases in illegal immigrants. And Elon has said that a Kamala victory would mean that swing states no longer exist, that every swing state would turn blue.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think you could also say the same about Trump, right? Not the same. He's not going to import immigration, but if Trump gets in this time, there'll probably be voter ID changes and other things that make it much more difficult to play the same kind of games that perhaps were played in the 2020 election, right? There may be deportations, right? Mm-hmm. So one way or another, this thing could be a very consequential election, right? You're not just talking about the next 4 years; you're potentially talking about the next 12 years or 18 years. We don't know, right? It could be a very, very consequential. Now, does it mean that it's the last election? I don't know, but I do think Elon has a point, and I think at some point you get enough of a population change that it becomes much more difficult to kind of go back to the previous platform. On the other hand, look, I think the debt situation is so extreme right now that, what kind of problems are we going to have in 8 or 12 years? It may be so big, we may be into such of a morass about trying to pay back this debt that, that problem may trump even like immigration or voting. Like, my point is that we could be in full-on stagflation at this point, right? And people may just sort of revolt and say, enough, on both sides of Congress. So I don't know. I do agree that with Elon that this is very consequential. This election is very consequential. I do think we need much stronger voter ID. It's crazy to me that you can vote without a driver's license. That's just insane to me. Like that concept makes no sense. On the other hand, if you want to buy Bitcoin at KYC on Coinbase, you need full KYC, biometric, this, that. Like, so buying crypto, buying $100 worth of Bitcoin on Coinbase has a lot more stringent requirements than voting in an election.
Yeah,
which is insane. Like, why can't you just come in with a utility bill and buy your stuff on Coinbase? Makes no sense.
And your home state, California, just passed a law banning voter ID outright.
Of course. I mean, everybody's trying to cook the books, right? Everybody's trying to change the rules in their favor, and I think it could be very important. And so this is, I do think this is kind of the last stand for the Republicans, right? Either the Republicans win this election, or we're going to have some kind of disbanding of the GOP, and who knows in what form it'll get, rebuilt. But, this MAGA thing under Trump had a certain identity. Trump's getting very old. Trump's not going to be Trump in the same sense. Maybe we get some more polished, MAGA like J.D. Vance in the future.
But there isn't some exact Trump replica who's 40 years younger to fill his shoes. So
there is no exact. You can't replicate Trump. Trump is a very unique phenomena in electoral history, right? And nobody has kind of the One of the guys on my spaces, Robert Klassen, the VC up north, he made a statement. He said, well, Trump's advantage is he's probably the most known name on the planet at this point. Everybody knows Trump. And whether you know him from being a president to, knowing him from being a talk show host or whatever, right? A celebrity apprentice. You know Trump. Everybody knows Trump. He's such a character, right? Kamala was virtually unknown 2 months ago. Like she was, and so she's being polished. She's being brought out. She's been fed these lines, and she's got this sort of insta personality. But most people don't know Kamala very well at all. So I think that's, it's going to be very hard for the Republicans to manufacture another Trump if this one doesn't work, right? If this play to win the election doesn't work, we're going to have to come up with something completely different. And it's not Mitt Romney either. We got to come up with something, a younger, more hip version of Trump. Could it be J.D. Vance? Perhaps, right? But I don't know. It's this is a sort of one time Custer's last stand, I think, for Trump. So we'll see. We'll see. I mean, again, everybody wants to make this thing seem like it's, the Republicans will die forever if Trump's not elected. I don't think they'll die forever. I think, Americans are smart. Americans do respond to adversity. That's the one thing you can never really count America out, right? Everybody who's done that has failed. America, and I think a pretty good example of that was before Reagan, everybody was, America's done. We got these gas lines, OPEC, Jimmy Carter, we're done. And then Reagan came and really brought America back, And, so I think that if we get more adversity in America, I think somewhere around the line, America will come back. I'm not sure how. I'm not sure under what form. And again, I'm not 100% on, I don't love 100% what Trump's doing in terms of, Jan 6 and stuff like that. It's sort of lesser of two evils, right? I think also if you told me that everybody was always saying the problem is Trump will never have another election after Trump. We'll never have another fair election. Well, now I think probably more danger of that under the Democrats, right? There's more danger that we're never going to have a fair election because they're just going to busload in immigration and have them vote with fake IDs, right? That seems to be a more clear and present danger than a second January 6th, with Trump in power. I just don't see it.
Yeah, it seems that way. And really what the Democrats have done is one of the most impressive political operations in modern history, turning Kamala, like you said, from a relative unknown now into someone who's 50-50 with one of the most well-known guys on the planet. And if they can exercise that same level of political acumen when Trump is out of the picture, really it's all bets are off for how long the Democrat stronghold can hold on to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue until something, like you said, America has reached a tipping point where people say enough is enough, and then somebody rises to power and we can shift this. And
again, look, you could sort of say America's reached a tipping point, but if you get, look, for example, I grew up in France, and France brought in an enormous number of Islamic Muslim, Islamic, as they say in America, in French, musulman. 10% of the country is Muslim, right? 10% of France, right? It's getting to the point where it's very hard for them to do anything that's in any ways against that, right? They're too big of a voting bloc at this point. And I don't think France sort of saw, they just sort of brought them in, and they were open because they did jobs that the French didn't want to do. But now it's they've gotten themselves a little bit in a pickle as far as they don't really love the situation where 10% of the population is not integrated at all, and it's not the same thing as in the U.S., right, where we've really integrated. Everybody who comes to America becomes American. And I just was at a Dodger game, and like there was everybody was American there. Everybody was cheering the Dodgers, right? And even if you came in 2 years ago as an immigrant, you're an American now, right? And you don't have that in France. So, the demographics can change sort of permanently in a country. And so, I think America could lose perhaps its fundamental edge. I don't think it will. I think America's still in a pretty strong position. But, I think this particular election is pretty important. But we'll see. We have no control over it either, So, if all
you live in California, I live in Massachusetts, our vote
there
will
you go.
effectuate no
Right.
change.
I threw some money against Elizabeth Warren, but I mean, it's a little bit of a hopeless fight,
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if you look, Elizabeth Warren has such an entrenched voting bloc here in Massachusetts. People don't even know what she does. People just know
They
that she
like
is
her.
our senator.
My mother lives in Boston, and I had this conversation with her, and she's, how could you not like Elizabeth Warren, Fred? I'm like, well, we all hate her, Mom, and she's like, no, she's great, she's fantastic. I mean, she's not Bernie Sanders, but she's really great. But that's a Massachusetts belief. So I sympathize, I sympathize with your. I feel your pain, as Clinton would say.
Exactly. So let's shift gears into Bitcoin here. You put out a great tweet. Yesterday. Fresh look at power law data, monthly data. First observation you made, you said we're on track to hit 1 million BTC in 10 years, which is 1.4 in log time since the Genesis block. Walk through a little bit about your current observations of where we are in Bitcoin's cycle relative to the power law on a macro timeline, and then also on like a more micro cyclical timeline. Because right now it seems like we're still mid-bull, according to the power law and according to a whole host of other indicators as well.
Well, we're below the trend line right now in power law, right? So, what does the power law tell us? Okay, the power law tells us over very long cycles, we are roughly going at very long cycles. We're going to be growing at this power of the time Genesis block, and that power is, let's call it 5.6 right now, right? That's roughly where it is. I don't know what this particular analysis says, but when I did it on a monthly basis, it's about 5.6 right now, right? And what that tells us, and the green line is the one I view as the most significant in your chart, right? That green line there. That green line is kind of the trend line. And what we do in the power law is, and the fact that we are anywhere close to a line here is just remarkable, right? Because, this is Bitcoin growing from 10 cents to 63,000, right? Or 73,000 at its peak, right? So, we've gone from 10 cents to 100,000, right? So we've gone 6 orders of magnitude, right? 10 to the power minus 1 to 10 to the power 5, right? So 6 orders of magnitude in 15 years. And it's all happened on a straight line. That's a power law. That's remarkable. Now, if you follow this power law out and you sort of go, okay, when do we hit 1 million? Well, we hit 1 million on the trend line right around 2034, right? On this one is, 2034, right? You can barely see the numbers on your screen, but 2034, right? So, that's the trend line. Now, you'll notice that we have, and we all know in this, we have these big bull markets, and you can call them bubbles, right? They're bull markets, but they have a very sort of exponential function type behavior when you're in one of these bull markets. And I think the best example is 2017. Go back to 2017, right? And look, we went from 1,000 on kind of the beginning of 2017 to 19,000, right? And that was in a year. We went up 20 times. That is completely unsustainable from every single part. You know, the power law says it's unsustainable. Your intuition tells you it's unsustainable. When you were back there in 2017, we felt that it was unsustainable. Everybody in the market in mid 2017 was like, this bubble's going to pop. Everybody was saying that, right? We had this, oh my God, we're in a bubble, it's going to pop, right? But nobody knew when it was going to pop, right? If you knew when it was going to pop, that'd be great, but you don't. So, we were trending, and you can see, look at in 2017 when it crossed the line. It was about 2,600. So we crossed this trend line at 2,600, right? And then we just kept on going, right? Just kept on going up. And we went up to several times the trend line, right? So it just kept on going. There was a massive bubble in terms of amount higher than the trend line, right? Now, could we go massively higher than the trend line right now? We could. We could go up, to 4 times the trend line, in next year, right? If we do go up to 4 times the trend line in the next year, yeah, I think we're going to be somewhere like 500,000, I definitely think that's possible, right? And if we get to 500,000, it will feel a lot like it did in 2017. We are going to have that same feeling of, oh my God, this thing's going to 1 million and then 2 million and it's going to be crazy. And you're going to have other people saying this thing is a complete bubble. You need to get out now, sell all your Bitcoin, etc. Right? So could we get into a bubble? We could. Are we 100% going to get into a bubble? Unknown, right? It's not clear. And the other thing I would like to, so I just don't know. I think that these bubbles, they're very hard to predict. I think, could 2017 have ended somewhere lower than 20,000? Yeah, it could have, right? But, once these bubbles really start getting going, it's just like anything else. It becomes pure speculation. It becomes a mania. It becomes like the South Sea bubble. It becomes like the .com bubble. It becomes like the Nikkei bubble, right? So we could have a bubble that is formed next year. We could, right? It's entirely possible. The power law tells us roughly how big that bubble we can expect it to go, if it does go. And the power law says, it could go up to 500,000, maybe. Notice that the last time it didn't get there, right? Mm-hmm. The last time it kind of didn't quite get there, and then it plopped out, right? And why did it not get there? Well, I think, first of all, last time, the bubble was fueled not so much by the supply shock. Mm-hmm. The bubble was fueled by Sam Bankman-Fried, Do Kwon, Celsius, Grayscale, a bunch of sort of bad actors, 3 Arrows. So the bubble was fueled by a bunch of things which sort of were very unsustainable, right? Sam Bankman-Fried raised like $1 billion in VC funding. He didn't raise $20 billion, but he started leveraging. Mm-hmm. The Do Kwon had nothing to do with Bitcoin until the very end. He decided to start buying a bunch of Bitcoin to hedge himself. But his thing was just an inherently unstable project where he was sort of saying, I'm going to pay people 20% yield on a stable coin. Mm-hmm. Now, if you think about that, that just sounds completely Ponzonomics, right? It's just like, wait, you're going to pay me 20% on my money? Like, in retrospect, we should have been like, okay, that thing's going to blow up. Okay.
Ludicrous. Like the riskiest corporate bond you could ever buy. Like,
right, and that was the cornerstone of their thing. Put your money in this coin and get 20%. Literally, and people like Raoul Pal fell for it. They said, yeah, it's basically risk-free. It's amazing. Now, in retrospect, it's like too good to be true, was too good to be true, is too good to be true, right? So I think, are these bubbles, how big do these bubbles get? Well, it depends a little bit on what fuels these bubbles, right? And, I think the last time it was fueled by really very suspicious stuff. Celsius, borrowing money at 7%. They had no idea of how they were even going to make 7% on stuff. They were just buying mining farms, right? Like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to borrow money at 7% and buy a mining farm. I'm going to try this DeFi strategy, right? It was not a great idea. It was not. There was no rhyme or reason to what Celsius was doing. Do Kwon we already covered. DX, complete fraud, right? And then Grayscale, we can kind of get into that too. But basically, you had a lot of fraud, a lot of bad actors last cycle, and the last cycle, was the last bull run due to halving? I don't think so, right? I don't actually even think, and I certainly don't think this cycle has, right? We had a halving 6 months ago. Everybody was like, beware, supply shock. There has been no supply shock, right? We've been trading sideways for 6 months. Okay, now, having aficionados would say, well, in 2016, it traded sideways for 6 months.
But you got to understand, too, in 2016, it was a fraction of the size that it is now, a fraction of a fraction. And so, if anything, these huge nine-figure, as high as 9-figure daily inflows from ETFs, that matters.
Yeah, they're much bigger.
It's
much bigger just in terms of Bitcoin, right? Than let's just look at what is, there's 415 Bitcoin that are mined a day. And there are inflows of several thousand Bitcoin a day from ETFs. So you can be more scientific, but the ETF market is maybe 10 times as big as the mining kind of effect on the market right now. So I would sort of say that mining doesn't matter so much to these cycles anymore. It really doesn't. And that was the last cycle. Now we're going to get half as much again. And we're now down to the last 5% of Bitcoin that has to be mined. Now, if you're a miner, it matters to you a lot, right? You really care a lot about these cycles because your revenue is just about to get chopped in two. And I'm not saying that there's no opportunities in mining. I don't know mining. I don't follow mining. I don't invest in mining stocks. It's a tough market. Some people seem to be able to do well in it, but it's not my lane, right? I'm a Bitcoiner. But I think that if you told me, do you think the 2028 halving is going to have a massive supply shock and will generate a new bull market in 2028? I'd say no. Very unlikely, right? You're telling me that going from 450 Bitcoin a day to 220 Bitcoin a day is going to massively create this bull market in 2029 or late 2028? No. So I think realistically, the mining is less of an important part of Bitcoin's growth story going forward. And I think what is going to be is financial TradFi adoption, right? That's going to be much more of a thing. Sovereign adoption of Bitcoin, right? And the good news is we have just enormous amounts of TradFi. There's $6 trillion that's sitting in money markets in the U.S., right? Mm-hmm. So there's an enormous amount of ammo that could go into these ETFs, and I think that could create it could keep a bull market going for 5 years or so, right, or even longer, right? But it doesn't feel to me like this notion of relying on these halvings is going to be that significant. And therefore, I would say, longer term, I think the halving cycle is dead right now. Doesn't mean that the liquidity cycle is going to die. Doesn't mean that we're not going to have really bad bear markets or bubbles. But I just don't see them being timed this way around halving dates anymore. And so I think there's a possibility, right, that 2025 is a very good year, but maybe not a complete bubble year, right? Maybe it just goes up 40% in 2025. And everybody like, oh, that's it, so bearish. Well, maybe. Maybe it goes up, it doubles in 2025. So maybe we get to 100,000 this year and 200,000 next year. Well, if we get to 200,000 next year, and you look at this thing, you're there now. Well, trend line's 144, and you're at 200,000. Are you massively overvalued? No. Could you potentially continue on to 2026 now, right, and rally up again another 30, 40%? Sure, you could, right? You could go up to 300,000, and now your trend line's at 193,000, right? So what I'm trying to paint a picture of, it's possible that we get into a very different market here, which is like a 5-year bull market maybe, or 6-year bull market, where it's not as bubbly, right? And it's not as bubbly. It's growing very well at very high compounded rate, but it's not going to these crazy, 1% per day exponential, thing. So I don't know. I think one of the things that's very important to say in trading or in investing is, what do you know and what do you really not know? And I don't know how long, how bubbly we can get in this next bull market, And I'm not even 100% sure that I care, right? And why do I say that? Because I'm not looking at what happens in the next year or two, right? I'm investing in Bitcoin for really the next 10 years, right? I don't need to use my Bitcoin, right? So if I take a 10-year view and I go to that $1 million number, right? And I go to that $1 million number, I'm like, okay, let's say I'm trying to hold out for Bitcoin 1 million, right? Yeah, if I go into a 10-year time frame, I'm going to probably, with really high confidence, I'm going to get somewhere between 376,000 and 2.8 million. Now, there's not a number in that range that I dislike, right? I like all those numbers, right? I like 1 million. I'm okay with 376,000, and I love 2.8 million. So all those numbers work for me, right? And I don't need my Bitcoin for between now and 10 years. I might dribble out a little bit of it, but not. I don't really need most of my Bitcoin for that period, right? So I think if you have a 10-year horizon, I think you really don't need to worry too much about the next cycle. And if we do get like a crazy cycle, you can rebalance a portfolio and use the Kelly criterion, which is basically sort of saying, I'm going to use a fixed percentage of my net worth in Bitcoin, right? Pick that percentage and just rebalance to that number, right? And that, I would sort of say the aggressive number on that scale would be 70%, right? So let's just say you say I'm 70% in Bitcoin. I have 30% cash and 70 or bonds, whatever, something safe, right? And 70% Bitcoin. Well, great. We have a $200,000 a year next year. Great. You're certainly no longer, before you rebalance, you're not 70% in Bitcoin at that point. You're probably 85% in Bitcoin, right? So you're great. So now you sell 15% of your portfolio that's in Bitcoin, and you bring it down to 70%. Okay? And then if we have another really good year that goes up another 100,000, great. You sell a little bit more, right? But the Kelly criterion basically takes you out of the market as it goes up, keeps you at sort of a very high, allocation. And, yes, you would have made more if you just held it up and you timed it perfectly. But also what it does is it's not going to try to take you out of the market completely, right? Because if we do get to 200,000, I think that there's a very big, there's a scenario you make a fundamental mistake. You just get out of the market entirely. You try to trade out of it, right? Okay, great. You sold all your Bitcoin at 200,000. Great. Guess what happens? The next, you don't ever get the right buy signal that you're looking for. Right? And you basically end out without any more Bitcoin. You've basically sold at 200,000. And 20 years from now, it's at 10 million. And you're the guy who sold at 200,000, And so I really think with something as good as Bitcoin, you really have a huge incentive to keep the majority of your position completely intact forever. That's what I think. This is like buying Microsoft in 1986. This is like buying Amazon in 2000. This is like buying Apple in, 4. This is an amazing opportunity for a long-term holding. You should not be trading this thing a lot. If you do anything, you should just peel off a very mathematically simple number every year at even yearly increments. You should not try to completely time this market. That's my opinion. And, we'll see. I mean, I think, some people will do it and they will get completely out. And, I don't want to be out of Bitcoin. I never want to be under 50% Bitcoin. Never. Even if Bitcoin is going in a severe bear market, I still want to have 50% of my net worth in Bitcoin. I think. And I'll take the pain. It's fine. I'll wait it out, with that 50%. That's what I think. So I don't know. That's just sort of my approach to this stuff. I definitely think the power law is a real thing. I think a lot of these other things, as far as estimating length of bubbles and so on, it's starting to get a little bit like technical analysis to me. It's sort of like you're looking at tea leaves, and I just don't have a lot of faith in these tea leaves and history repeats and all this stuff. I don't have quite as much faith in it. And I also do think that I do have a lot of belief right now that this ETF thing is just starting. I feel like we are going to get the story of most people putting their money into Bitcoin and adding Bitcoin to their portfolio. This story is going to happen over the next 4 years. So we have some really good, I'd say, fundamental reasons why I think you should be very bullish for Bitcoin for the next 4 or 5 years, right? And I wouldn't get too caught up in cycles.
Fantastic. Yeah, because the reasons Bitcoin goes up in price, they change over time. And so to ascribe one reason to the reason that Bitcoin's price goes up is a flawed way of looking at it. The power law simply ascribes a square to the price and a square to the time, and then the reasons Bitcoin's price goes up over time vary.
Well, I think ultimately, if you look at it really far enough out, right, what's happening? Bitcoin is going to become world money. Mm-hmm. That's what I believe, right? It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen in something like 20 or 30 years, right? In 20 or 30 years, your children, Joe, are going to be, they're going to be like, what is a dollar again? I know we still have them, but what are they useful for? Because I just need some sats. I need some sats from my lunch money or whatever. Your grandchildren will be saying that. You know what I mean? Your grandchildren
that
will
bond
not.
That you bought me when I was born. I want to, those dollars. We don't even use them anymore. I need to convert.
Yeah, we'd have barely look. It'll be like rotary telephones or CDs. And you see these great videos of millennials like trying to place a call with a rotary telephone. They have no idea how it works, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the dollar, the idea that we have these currencies that the governments can just arbitrarily print, that's going to go away, right? And we are going to converge on Bitcoin being the world store of value and the world currency. It's going to be used for everything. You want to buy a pack of bubble gum? That's 10 sats, sir. Fundamentally believe that we're going to get to that point. And, it may be wrapped sats. It may be, probably will be mainly custodial, just like, boom, just put your Apple wallet and you store your sats in your Apple wallet and you Apple Pay your sats to somebody else, right? Like, that's what I do when I go to the farmer's market. I think you're going to go to a farmer's market 20 years from now. Everything will be in sats. That's what I think, and so I think if you believe in that, and I think there's a lot of reasons why that we're going to go to that world, in the real world. And I think the virtual world and the online world is going to start dominating most of our purchases, right? We're going to purchase most things via e-commerce. We're already doing that to some extent with Amazon. But, Amazon will start carrying Bitcoin. You'll have your Bitcoin wallet in Amazon. You'll be able to fund it and just use sats from your Bitcoin wallet held in Amazon. If we get to that world, right, that's the world where we're going to. And we're going to a world where fundamentally we have a finite currency in the world. And I just don't think infinite currencies, printable on-demand currencies, are gonna work. And so you have an opportunity now to front-run that phenomena that's going to happen with pretty high certainty. The power law tells you it's going to happen with pretty high certainty. And you can get in 20 years ahead of the pack. Well, this is a way to make a lot of money. This is like, we're opening up the, this new place called California. You can kind of claim some land. It's literally like that. You know what I mean? And come settlers, come over here, come claim your homestead.
The early days of the digital frontier.
It is the early days of the digital frontier. So look, I think we can see where it's going. I think you can get your piece. You can, you can claim your piece of history too. It's sort of like, it's already hard to get a Bitcoin, right? Like most people can't afford a Bitcoin, but it's going to become really hard to get a Bitcoin, right? Once a Bitcoin's at $1 million, it's going to be the thing where the girl goes into a bar and apparently this guy has a whole Bitcoin. And I definitely think we're going to go to that world. I think you can front run it, and I think you just got to be very patient, and you have to learn patience, and and there's a lot of things you shouldn't do, right? So you shouldn't trade, you shouldn't get involved in too many shit coins. You shouldn't, I don't think you should do too much with options. You need to avoid those temptations, right? And you need to just simply buy Bitcoin. That's what I would recommend to people. Now, if you want to buy an ETF, that's fine too, right? Buy an ETF, you can buy an ETF. If you want to do self-custody, also very good, right? Do self-custody. Use multisig, Don't try to just write it down on a piece of paper and put it in your desk drawer. That is not a good place to store your seed phrase, right? Yeah. Use passphrases, use multisig, learn about storage solutions, Michael Saylor made a really good comment. He said, look, you spend, I can't remember the total number, 30,000 hours in your life accumulating all your money. You should probably spend more than $100 hours trying to figure out how to keep your money. So I think properly securing your Bitcoin, having inheritance planning on your Bitcoin, all this kind of stuff, very important. And that's as much as important as when you got in. Like when you got in won't matter whether you got in 2024 or 2021. No difference, right? Bitcoin was pretty much the same price. But when we're 15 years from now, it's just sort of like looking at Amazon. You're like, did it matter whether you got in January of 2001 or in March of 2004? It didn't matter, right? What mattered is how long did you hold the thing, right? That's what mattered. And I think that the one thing that matters with Bitcoin is how long have you held it, and did you not screw up your holding? Did you hold the keys? Did you do everything right? Are you verifying all the time? You know, sort of like being in one of those Minuteman missiles. You know, you kind of gotta check the codes. You got to go through the drills. You know, and you need to make sure you can use your Bitcoin a little bit too. And that's why I would also encourage people to actively, if they're storing Bitcoin, they should actively use their Bitcoin to buy little things. You know. Get an account on Cash App, move Bitcoin in and out, do some Lightning stuff. Just make sure you're actually doing this, because another really bad thing is just putting it in a hardware wallet and forgetting about it. And then you're going to be like, what was that passphrase again? I know it was something to do with an animal, but which animal? And there was a number involved. You know, was it possum 325? You know, you won't remember. Your brain's going to be the problem, right? So you gotta go through these drills and really kind of keep a very, very methodical approach to things. And if you're going to try to hold something for 10 years, that's going to require like just a mental model and a kind of discipline. It's just like going to the gym, right? Or watching what you eat. You better keep a diary. You better test this thing, you know. So I think those things are really important, and the temperament. And the worst thing you can possibly do is not get enough sleep, get too excited about something, go quadruple long on Binance on some leveraged perpetual, and then get completely wrecked, right? That's the worst possible thing you can do. So, you know, I think Warren Buffett has this saying which really resonated with me. He said, you know, this is not rocket science. You know, this is not a rocket science business. We don't need PhDs here, right? We don't need geniuses. What we need is people with really even temperament. And I really think that's true, right? Like, you know, the most important thing here is keeping a cool head and not getting too emotional about this stuff.
100%. Yeah, think about Bitcoin
on the way up or down. Like you just, you know, and, you know, one of the good things about having gone through a couple cycles is, you know, you kind of, it I wouldn't say numbs you, but you become a little bit more like, oh, well, the market went down today, 5%. I'm down a lot of money today. You know, you take it in stride. You don't care as much, right? And you've got to develop a little bit of that thick skin. Also, when the market goes up, you're not like, yay, Ferrari. You're just like, oh, well, market went up. Okay. Now, I'm as guilty as everybody else of looking at the market and cheering everybody on and rah, rah, rah. And I love it, right? But I don't trade. My exit valve is I get on Twitter Spaces or something, and just have fun, or I got this event coming up with a bunch of Bitcoiners. We'll all meet. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think the definition of a true Bitcoiner is somebody who gets up, wakes up in the morning, first thing they do, check the price of Bitcoin, and the next thing they do is nothing. Regardless, right? Like, but checking the price of Bitcoin, oh, Bitcoin price is up. Great, yay. Or Bitcoin price is down. Am I going to do anything? Am I going to trade? No, I'm not going to do anything. Right? I think that's kind of the life that we've chosen. I think it's a fine life, but you need to try to keep that even keel. And it's hard sometimes. It's very hard. You know, we want to do more. You know, but you know, look, there's, you know, I would sort of say, pick a different hobby for to spend your time. You know, metalworking. You know. Reading Renaissance literature or something. I don't know, whatever you like to do in your spare time. Golf, you know, whatever, right? But don't try to overthink Bitcoin. I think that if you try to overthink it and you're like, I need to be in quadruple long MSTR options and I need to sell calls against it, and like, no, probably your thinking is wrong if that's where your brain is going, right? I think your brain should be, I've got my stack, I might be earning a little bit of money next year. I might be increasing my stack a little bit. We're up a little bit. Maybe I'm going to trim a little bit off the top of my stack, or I'm going to trim it every year exactly on December 31st, and I'm checking my tax thing, so I don't want to get ordinary income, be very, very, very methodological about this, right? Rather than be too emotional, and that's why I like looking at the math and the power law and stuff like that, because I do think it gives you a very kind of cold shower kind of, this is where we are. This is where it predicts, but we could have some major drops, and and at the end of the day, we could have huge bubbles, but you're never going to time it. You're never going to get out. So do not think you are going to pick the top of this market and sell all your Bitcoin and then buy it again at the low. And I just think that's fundamentally not a great way to play the market. And if we're right, and Bitcoin does do 100x over the next 20 years, if we fundamentally believe that, not all of us have 20 years left on this planet. You certainly do. I might, probably do. You know what I mean? But if you got 20 years left on this planet and you got 100x or 200x in those 20 years, just think about it. You really need to optimize that? No, you really don't. So that's kind of my view. I feel like we humans we're always we're fidgeters. We just fidget. We're fidgeters, and we love to think, I did this. Yeah, pat myself on the back. It's great. But really, you accomplished most of your value when you bought that Bitcoin in the first place. That's it. That's your big pat on the back. Pat on the back. You bought the Bitcoin. Good. You
Don't trade it.
Live by
Occam's razor. Don't trade it. Live by Occam's razor. Store it securely. Don't think too much
store it
about
securely, and don't be your worst enemy, right? And don't get into trouble. Don't do illegal things. Don't get divorced. Easier said than done. I mean, divorce rate's pretty high, but I mean, if you've got this Bitcoin, and I do think it does tend to make you a better person, right? Because if you got the Bitcoin, and you're sort of like, okay, well, I fundamentally believe that I kind of have my savings box checked off, right? Well, now I can be maybe a better husband, a better dad, right? I maybe develop some other habits that make me a better person, right? So I think you can focus on a lot of other things because you got the savings box checked off, and it's sort of like, as I think it was either Safedine or Saylor who said, listen, I think the previous mode of trying to compete against fiat, you almost feel like I got to be like this rock star hedge fund manager just to kind of break even, right? And I got to study Nvidia's earnings, and I got to decide between, Apple's quarterlies, and then you need to invest in 3 different, mutual funds and all the rest. And at the end of the day, Bitcoin sort of makes that, it sort of simplifies all that, right? So you don't have to try to be something that you're not, which is necessarily a great stock picker, right? In fact, there are very few great stock pickers. Even most people cannot outperform the index. And so, we have this vehicle. This should be your savings vehicle. Cross that off. Cross that box off. And, then spend your time that you might have been spent analyzing, Barron's and the Wall Street Journal to try to pick the next, Facebook or Google, and maybe focus that maybe on either finding a better source of income or just becoming a better person or a better dad or a better wife or whatever you are, a better human, So I think and I definitely feel like I like Bitcoiners because generally speaking, I notice that Bitcoiners they tend to be a little bit more grounded because I feel like they've got that box checked off. Whereas I feel like there's a lot of other people, who they're just so nervous. They just want to change careers every 2 weeks, every 2 years. They've always got this new startup idea that they're going to do, and they're fundamentally have this angst about their future, right? And that usually they haven't discovered Bitcoin, right? They're worried. They got this worry about their future, about can they afford a house and a family and everything else? Can they do that? And I think with Bitcoin, you've got at least a big part of that under control, right? You still need to go figure out how to make money and have a good job and a good life and everything else. But if you have a good saving strategy, that's enormous. Like that's an enormous part of your life, especially if you're like in your 30s, right? Like you got whatever you're going to do, your most of your earning power is ahead of you, right? And I think this ability to save in Bitcoin. I made one tweet the other day. And I thought it was a pretty clever tweet. It says, Naval said, "You'll never get rich renting out your own time." And I saw it. My first reaction was, well, that's pretty clever, Naval. Except that would have been clever 10 years ago. I said, right now, actually, you can do pretty good just by renting out your time as long as you invest at your earnings pretty well, right? So if you just rent out your time and invest in Bitcoin, I think you're going to do great, right? And so I would say be my advice to most young people is figure out a way to make money by quote unquote renting out your time. Go get a high paid job, whatever it is, right? A lawyer, AI, working for an AI, whatever it is, however you can make money, figure that out, and then take that money that's coming in, take most of it. Don't go spend it on a Lamborghini, right? Take that money that's coming in and buy some Bitcoin with it, stack it, and I think that's a generally going to be a very good algorithm to use over the next 10 years. And I think people who do that 10 years from now will end up being, having the nice home on the block, or they'll be in the house on the hill. And, people who don't do that algorithm, including people who start their own startups, right? I think, some of you work for a startup, you start your own thing. It might work, it may not work. But if you're spending all your money, all your effort on the startup, right, and you're not saving any in Bitcoin, I'd rather be the guy who doesn't do the startup and saves his money in Bitcoin than the guy plunks 100% of all his money in the startup trying to be, the next Facebook. I think that's probably at this point in the tech startup ecosystem. And look, I joined I started at the very beginning of the tech startup. When I did my first software company, there wasn't a lot. I mean, there was hundreds of startups in the U.S., not millions. It was hundreds. So, you knew all the other guys. So like that guy's done the calendar app, that guy's doing the 3D. And of course, there were still big companies like Microsoft, but startup culture was, it was small, But now startup culture is enormous. Anybody can do a startup, right? And so I think that, it's the chance of you succeeding at a startup is pretty low right now. How many apps are there in the App Store? 5 million, What's the chance that your great app, is going to be, it's going to even get into the top 1,000. Well, pretty low, right? 1 in 1,000, less than 1 in 1,000, right? So, I think creating a startup right now, unless you've got a really clear angle, right, is tough. And I'd say that I would not put all of your marbles in the startup thing, I would at least like take some of your marbles and own Bitcoin. That's what I would say. You know, that would be my words of advice to him. And I wish, I mean, everybody wished they discovered Bitcoin earlier, but, I kind of wish Bitcoin was discovered earlier, because like if Bitcoin had been discovered 10 years earlier, 20 years earlier, I don't think I would have done my last 3 startups. If I had discovered Bitcoin, kind of gotten the level of conviction that I have, let's say 4 years ago, I wouldn't have done, I had a startup which I sold to Viacom. I did very well on this startup, I made $10 million personally on this startup. We sold it for, $60 million, something like that, to Viacom. But, it took 4 years from my life, if I had just taken the money and invested it in Bitcoin, I'm sure that over that 10 years, that startup was over 10 years ago. I'm sure that I could have just taken $2 million, put it in Bitcoin at that price, and that I just had lying around that I put into the startup, and that money I would have outperformed the startup at very little effort, right? So I'm just saying, how you do in life is a function of your successes in the entrepreneurial field, or which I'll include real estate in there too, right? If you're getting real estate, but like your successes in life, in business, but also how do you take that success and translate it into investment, and how does your investment grow, right? And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, at least the ones that I knew in the last 5 to 10 years, they just went 100% in on their business. And they never thought of investing at all, right? They're like, I'm in my business. I'm 100% allocated to Fred, in the Fred company. And, and I think you should be, as you get older especially, but just in general, you should be thinking about investing as much as, earning new money. So I think it's a combination of those two things: investing new money and earning and investing. And I think you don't have this unless you fall in love with an investment like Bitcoin. But once you fall in love with an investment like Bitcoin, it's pretty easy to just want to stack more, right? So, get the conviction that makes you like, I love this thing. I really want to stack more. Any new money I come in, I'm just going to start stacking. And I think that's that'll serve you really well, right? As long as you have that kind of mindset. That's what I think.
Absolutely.
And it's just, as you get, I'm an older entrepreneur, and I just see people's path through life, and I definitely see that, your 30s and your 40s, you should try to get some money, but it really matters how you end up investing that money, and you can make smart investments, like, I have a very good investment in Bitcoin, or I can make really stupid investments. I bought a French castle, the worst investment you could possibly make, right? Now, I still kind of I get a kick out of it. I bought it 20 years ago. Probably worth what I paid for it 20 years ago, total all in. But, whatever, you're not living forever. But from a pure investment point, don't buy a French castle. In fact, don't go crazy on real estate. If you have to buy a place to live in, go buy your place to live in. But don't go nuts on real estate. Bitcoin's going to outperform real estate, in my opinion. If you have to rent. It's fine. I would advise people to rent and buy Bitcoin here, rather than to get, completely trapped into the real estate game. Because that's another one where if you got too big of a mortgage bill, you're going to spend all your cash flow just paying that mortgage. And guess what? There's not going to be any money left over for Bitcoin. So, you can say I want both, but in many cases, you're not going to have an option to get both. So I think that you really got to figure out how important is Bitcoin in your future 10-year plan, and how much do you believe in this $1 million Bitcoin scenario, and
then go from there.
If you can watch little podcasts like this, the one thing I think it can get out of you is it could help you develop longer, bigger conviction, right? To hold for longer. And I don't know. Hopefully that makes some kind of difference to somebody. I don't know. I don't know if it will, but I do think people do get completely crazy, and they're all Wen Moon and everything else. But
you certainly are. I mean, you've amassed a very sizable following in a pretty short amount of time, and you've preached that exact message, right? Buy and hold. There's all this other junk out there. Ignore it. Focus on what you can control. Leverage your human capital, and then deploy it into the one asset that has been the best performing for decades and will continue to be.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, Joe, one of the reasons I've gotten a lot of people who follow me is, I will say I don't have an agenda, right? Like, I'm not trying to sell something. I'm not trying. And contrary to what you may have heard, I do not have a trading course. Okay? I'm not selling a trading course. I have no product that I'm selling. Okay? I'm doing this because I have a lot of Bitcoin and because I love Bitcoin. Yeah, that's why I'm doing it. Okay? And my belief is, Bitcoin's been very good to me, and I think it will continue to be very good for me. And I'm thrilled to be part of the Bitcoin community, and I want to push the Bitcoin community forward. Now, I'll look at all aspects of Bitcoin, in terms of I'm not going to say absolutely not to ordinals or layer twos or anything like that. Sure, we can consider all those things. Bitcoin, borrowing against your Bitcoin? Sure, why not? Custody solutions? Definitely. Look, let's talk about all different kinds of ways. ETFs, I'm super pro, right? So I'm for Bitcoin in all its forms, in everything it has to offer. I did an interview with Udi and his, quantum cats. A lot of people think, oh, these quantum cats are a scam or whatever. Look, maybe, but maybe art on Bitcoin is going to be a thing, right? And we have one panel on this Bitcoin First conference that's called Art on Bitcoin. So we've got, and I have this friend of mine who's a New York artist, and she's coming, and some people are starting. It's not quite a thing yet, but it could happen, right? We could start seeing real serious art happening on Bitcoin. So I want to keep that door open, right? I don't think like it's going to clutter the block space. No. Let's see. Let's see if we can get art on Bitcoin. This woman that I follow and I sometimes talk to, Violetta, she's made she's a musician. And she did a really popular, she made an NFT consisting of songs on ETH. Okay, now you're sort of like, who's going to buy a bunch of songs on ETH from a millennial musician? Well, she sold, $500,000, $1 billion worth of songs on ETH. Like for a musician, an indie musician, that's phenomenal, right? Well, she has a video out. She's kind of almost crying in front of him. She goes, I sold a song for 1 Bitcoin. She sold an ordinal for 1 Bitcoin, okay, with the song. So how great is that, right? That we have some, is this going to be the future of music? I don't think it's the future of music, but I think it's fantastic that we have this Italian, she lives in Italy. I think she lives in Italy. I'm not even 100% sure, but let's call her, she's really Italian. She moved to the States a little bit, I think moved back to Italy. Completely outside the record system, made this ordinal with some song that she inscribed on Bitcoin and sold it for 1 Bitcoin. Like, this is great. She's now a whole coiner, you know what I mean? And so, I think that this Bitcoin economy is cool. Like, people who have businesses where they're selling stuff on Bitcoin, I'm all for it, I think we should support that as much as we can. And, to the extent we can do commerce on Bitcoin or pay with Bitcoin, I love that. I wrote this book on Bitcoin. Of course we had pay with Bitcoin. And of course people did pay with Bitcoin, by the way. So I think if I had the book and you couldn't pay with Bitcoin, I'd be a fraud, right? I don't think Bitcoin's only a store of value. I think Bitcoin should be used for transaction. I try to use it as much as possible. If I owe somebody any money, my first reaction is, you want me to send you Bitcoin? Happy to send you Bitcoin, Want to do a bet? I'll bet you, I'll bet you a million sats, So I will use Bitcoin as much as I possibly can. And I love hearing people who have products or services or just use cases that are already working on Bitcoin, right? I think it's fantastic. So I'm not, as much as I say you should hold it and say, I want to see the Bitcoin economy work. And, I love all aspects of anything that intersects Bitcoin. And if I could be just a part of that, I think that's so cool. And I really also would, I would like to see a lot of the stuff that's been done outside of Bitcoin come to Bitcoin, right? So, I think the Ethereum, like NFTs is one, but also borrowing and lending, like Aave, right? I'd like to see more of that stuff on Bitcoin. I'd like to explore ways that Bitcoiners can do, DeFi on Bitcoin, right? Potentially borrowing other tokens that are created on Bitcoin and trading them in DEXs and things like that, AMMs. But I think Bitcoin can be the unit of account for all of this stuff. I think there's no chance that 20 years from now you're going to be having Solana ATMs all over the world. I don't see it personally. I could be wrong, but I don't think we're going to go to a Solana standard. But so I'm interested in, because we have this new thing, Bitcoin. Who knows? We've been completely wrong up till now, right? Satoshi even thought we'd have micropayments by now. We don't have micropayments on Bitcoin, Do we have Bitcoin banks? Hal Finney predicted we'd have Bitcoin banks. We don't have Bitcoin banks either, So we don't know. It's really hard to predict how the future exactly is going to unfold. But I'm really interested in anything that, is around Bitcoin. I'm not going to say I'm going to invest in your startup, but I may, right? But I would say over the next, I'm very, the only reason I say I may is I'm very a big believer that all my money can work really well with Bitcoin right now. So you're going to have to come up with a really great idea for me to put my money outside of just pure Bitcoin and into your Bitcoin related startup, right? Because I'm such 100%. A believer in Bitcoin. So, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to give you, let's just say 1 Bitcoin to do something with your startup, right? Well, it's got to do better, not just in dollar terms, but it's got to do better than me just holding my Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So if you can convince me that you can use your Bitcoin, you can take something that will outperform 1 Bitcoin, I'm all ears. I'm interested,
Yeah, as it institutionalizes too and ends up on the balance sheets of these companies and even these VC firms, Bitcoin's compound annual growth rate is going to become a financial benchmark for whether companies are investable or not.
I think so. I think people are going to start looking at their Bitcoin balance sheet, right? Mm-hmm. And look, you got, Metaplanet, and now David Bailey tweeted, should I start MSTR in India? I don't know. Maybe it's crazy, but a lot of companies are going to start owning some Bitcoin. I think it's inevitable.
It's much more popular, too, than many know. I know several players who are private companies who haven't announced it, and they have in the 10 to 50 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Something they haven't even announced, but it's something that they're just holding on to. And that's much more popular than people know, and it's only going to get more popular.
I talked recently with, I think I was on Spaces, and with a Bitcoin dentist in Australia. And he's like, I own a chain of dental things. And I'm like, do you take Bitcoin? He goes, yeah, we do take Bitcoin. So if you want to come in for your dental operation, you want to pay in Bitcoin, we do accept Bitcoin. But he goes, we're very proud that we got 3 Bitcoin on our balance sheet. And I was like, oh. He goes, yeah, it's like pretty good for Australia. It's pretty good. And he goes, I got 8 shops and I got 3 Bitcoin on our balance sheet. And we manage it very well, and we're very happy with it. So I thought that was cool, like a dentist, an 8-chain dentist operation in Bitcoin. Has got in Australia has got 3 Bitcoin. That's great. I think there's going to be more and more and more of that, right? Car washes, why not?
Mm-hmm.
So I agree. And look, I think I think that can be kind of a service that we provide to people is to give them the idea that maybe that's something like they're a car wash. Maybe they should be, they should store some of their money in Bitcoin. I don't think it's tons of people yet, but I do think small businesses should be all over this thing. They really should. Mm-hmm. They shouldn't just put their money in Wells Fargo. I think it's, having a little bit of a reserve in Bitcoin could really be great for a small business. So I'm in agreement. I don't know. If you find some in mass, let me know.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'll definitely, interview some of them on my podcast or something it'll be good to get their stories out there.
Oh, yeah, help drive a little business for them. I know on Mass Adoption's website, I think it's massadoption.com, they have a list of Massachusetts businesses, an actual map, an interactive map of businesses that accept Bitcoin.
I'll show you this. Have you heard of Shirttail Creek's Farms?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so this is a steak place that accepts Bitcoin. So, just sort of like for shits and giggles, I posted, I need a steak sponsor. I need somebody to send me some steaks and I'll promote you a little bit. And so I got the things about Shirttail Farms, and we're in Texas. We got this thing, so I pushed some traffic to them and stuff, and it's great. They sent me 3 steaks. I'll show you the steak. Hold on one second. This is the operation. These things look really good. I froze them. They're there. This is the bone-in ribeye, right? The bone-in New York. Then I have the bone-in ribeye, really good, and then I have the ground beef, right? So, they sent me these things, and I got to tell you, this is a great way to get podcasters. They should send you some.
I'd love to. Steak is.
I will definitely tell them. Get my pal Joe to talk about your steaks. And I got to tell you, after I put some stuff, people are like, I've noticed a lot of Bitcoiners are going to this place. And not even maybe because of me, but just in parallel, right? Mm-hmm. They found this place. And now I know they do eggs now. And there are people like, why can I only buy 3 cartons of eggs at a time? Why the limit? It's not fair. They're like, look, we only have so many chickens, so many hens.
It drives interest in businesses. People we're not alone. People want to spend Bitcoin, and then it creates this insular economy.
And this is what I think. I think for us to promote these things, look, I told them, listen, there's how much does it cost to promote? I said, send me some steaks and I'll promote it. I'm not interested in making money. But I will try these steaks. I'm going to fry these steaks up. I'm going to barbecue these babies, and I will spend an hour on my time. It doesn't matter. I'll just cook by the steaks with my pal Ben, and we're going to cook them and eat them, and we'll give you a little taste test between the ribeye and the New York. I just have to figure out: am I going to pan grill them on the cast iron, or am I going to barbecue them? I don't know.
So what I would recommend, because I eat steak every day, I would recommend a high heat oil like avocado oil. slap
Okay.
it straight on the cast iron, let it defrost a little
Cast
bit on
iron,
its
though.
own, obviously, and then once
How
it's
long do
fully
I have to
defrosted.
defrost for?
Yeah, so until it's room temperature. From frozen, you'll probably want to let it defrost for like 8-9 hours. Just put it out on
Okay.
your counter, and then
Yeah.
once it's nice and room temperature,
Yeah.
if you like it rare, medium rare, you don't even have to put it on the grill at all. You just slap it straight on the cast iron. Get the avocado oil on there first,
Okay.
and once the smoke is billowing off the cast iron, then you
Okay.
slap the steak on there. And then once it's done, let it sit. Put a little bit of butter, put some thyme, put some garlic on it, and
Oh, I
yeah,
like that.
it's insane. Yeah. So that's my method. I
And then you
hardly
just let
my
it
mom.
sort of like you just let with the cover on top of it, or no?
No cover. So
No cover.
if you've got a crank that fan, push it all outside,
I see.
or what you can do is if your grill has a little stove top like next to it, mine does, then you
Right.
could do it outside. My parents used to always get on my case about me doing it inside, so much so that they installed a vent above the grill because of the stovetop rather because of how often I would cook steaks. But that would be my recommendation for a perfect steak.
Well, there you heard it. Joe's recommendation for the perfect steak, and he's going cast iron, which is an interesting choice. You know, it gives you the right, but then you might go with the grill later, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, what you can do
Give
is
the
you can
grill
put it on the
marks just
grill.
a little bit of the
Yeah. If you prefer like medium rare or medium,
yeah.
you can put it on the grill to make it a little warmer, make it so that the inside's a little more
Yeah.
pink, and then finish it off on a piping hot cast iron with a really high heat oil like
Right.
tallow or avocado oil.
Well, okay. Well, it's good to know. And look, I'm very bullish on Bitcoin. I think we're in for a great, a great year. And if we do another Bitcoin first, Joe, I hope to see you in person. Otherwise, I'll see you probably in. You're going to go to Vegas.
Definitely. Yes,
Okay.
100%.
Yeah.
I will see you in Vegas.
I'll see
And
you in Vegas. We'll do a little side party, with the Bitcoin First crew in Vegas, and we'll grill some steaks. We'll eat some steaks. We'll eat some steaks in Vegas.
phenomenal. I love it. We'll eat some steaks in Vegas. Well, Fred, best of luck with the Bitcoin First event. For those
Okay,
of you
thank you
watching
very much.
this, definitely go check out. There are only around 30 spots left.
Yeah.
It is in 11 days, so get your tickets now. And obviously follow Fred on X, .Krueger, one of the best Bitcoin accounts out there.
Okay, thanks a lot, Joe. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, Fred.
See ya.